how to push your posing in animation when your reference might not be the strongest. So this is something that many of us who have filmed our own reference, we've probably discovered at some point, is that we're not always the best at filming reference. Sometimes we're going to look at reference, and our own reference especially, and it's just, we're very stiff. There's nothing that interesting an hour and a half later. Yeah, I need that, like, that card to come up and 1 hour later, and then 1 day later, one eternity later. Need I should actually program that onto Twitch, just to have this like pop-up that comes up. It would just be so fitting. um so how do we deal with poses that might not be interesting? So let's actually show a visual of what I'm talking about here. Let me open this up. So when we're shooting reference, or when we're looking at reference online, there is really good reference. So for example, here, you look at this, look at that line of action. Wow, it's so clear. Look how pushed the pose is. Amazing. I'll be wrapping up the stream soon, 1 eternity later, yeah. Or this is going to be a short stream, 5 hours later. So we've got these poses. Look how dynamic they are. Amazing lines of action. Look at the curve of the arm. The composition is just fantastic. Powerful. Look at the depth on there, that foreshortening. So cool. Is this what happens most of the time? No. When we shoot reference, there will be times when our reference is really great and super dynamic. Other times, it's not. Sometimes we try to hit a pose and it just looks more boring than anything else. So for example, this pose is a character supposed to be swinging the sword, but does it really look like they're swinging the sword? Or does it look like they're just kind of and pretending? This pose isn't the strongest. It's a weak pose. And we have to build our reference off of that. We have to build our animation off of this reference. That can be very detrimental to our animation if we use this as a base. Another variation is, like I was saying earlier, boring reference. What if our character is standing straight? Look at this. Where's the line of action? Where's the visual interest in here? You have this character standing straight. It's kind of twinned. Standing straight. Just standing there. Where's the visual dynamic posing we can do here? Now, these ones are not nearly as bad as some of the poses I've seen and I've shot myself when I've shot reference, where you're shooting reference and there's just this moment in your reference where you just kind of, well, I'll put it this way, you die on screen. It's just boring. It's so boring to look at. How do you avoid letting that seep into your shots? Because this can happen. This has happened to me many times, especially when I was a student, where it's like, I have to follow my reference. I have to do what my reference is doing. So I take that pose and I put it in, and it's meh. It's bland, it's boring, it's not interesting to look at. So how do we avoid that? There's a few different ways. My favorite way is called the exploration method. And this is something I do whenever I plan out a new animation, or whenever I'm going through my shot and find a pose that is like, it's not great. I go, how can I make it better? How can I push this? And the way I like to do it is using gesture drawing, but you can do this just by pushing it in Maya, or just doing some thumbnail drawings as well. So let's kind of take an example here. Let's pick a pose. Which one? I want one that's really kind of just flat. Okay. Well, let's take this one. This one's kind of interesting because it's got props and stuff. So we'll take that. And what is it about this pose that kind of feels flat? Well, let me actually bring it in here to Clip Studio. There we go. Oh, we can go full screen here. So what's making this feel flat? Well, there's a lot of different things. One, the shoulders are just straight in comparison to the hips. So shoulders, hips, if you kind of look at them, it's straight. His balance is, if we find like right in the middle of the hips here, right down, it's almost centered between the feet. His head is centered on his hips, the top of his head centered right there. Everything is lining up. The arms are going out at the same angle. The legs are very close to being similar. The legs are probably some of the most dynamic parts of this because you got that angle change. But you can see how stiff that is. If we move this over to the side, does that look super interesting? No. It's okay, but it's very kind of bland. So, how can we push this? Well, the key here is that we explore the pose and see where it can be pushed and how that can be linked into the rest of our animation. So we're looking at one still pose here. It makes it easier. But when you look at your animation, your reference, you want to look at what's happening before, what's happening after, and kind of think of how things can link between the two. Let's kind of just stick with this stationary pose for now. So we look at this and we go, okay, what little variations do we see in this? Well, we can see that the shoulders do have a little bit of an angle this way. We can see that the head is tilted a little bit this way, and we do feel a little bit of this kind of taper in the legs where one leg is slightly out. So you try to find any variation you can and build off of that. So how can we build off of this? Well, what I do is I go through a list of a checklist in my mind. So I actually made a visual guide for this checklist here. If anyone's interested, this is the checklist I go through. And this is essentially my process for going through a pose. I go through the line of action, the silhouette, straights versus curves, weight balance, all of this stuff. So if anyone wants to use this, feel free. It's free to use. Go ahead. And there's explanations on what each thing is here. I'm not going to go into that. That's a whole talk all on its own. I actually recorded a demo going all over this. It should be in the stream highlights if anyone wants to check that whole presentation. So we've got this checklist and I'm going to go through one at a time. So for example, line of action. We'll stick with line of action and then contrapposto and straights versus curves. Those are kind of the big ones here. Contrapposto and twist. These are some of the bigger ones that we can use to help push this and make the pose more dynamic. So, and Tara always keeping me alive with the drinks. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Because otherwise I would just shrivel up into a horrible little raisin. So let's go with the line of action. What is the line of action right now? Well, let's keep moving this over to the side here. The line of action is very slight, but it is kind of curving this way. Very slight. Contrapposto, that's the angle of the shoulders versus the hips. Well, we can see the shoulders do have a little bit of a slant here. So what that means is that the hips, we can push the other way. That's going to give us that contrapposto. With that, what about twist? Well, twist is harder to draw here. And let's actually turn down the opacity there. So the twist would be which direction is his chest versus his hips. Naturally, what we tend to do when we're posing things out is we keep things very kind of flat. So everything's kind of angled the same way here. Don't do that. Instead, especially if you do this, you can see how these two cubes they're just kind of pointed in the same direction here. Try not to do that. Instead, you add the contrapposto, which is the angle there of the character, Now we try to add some twist. So the chest might be pushed up this way, whereas the hips might be angled this way. Or like that. This is going to make the character much more dynamic, even if it's just a tiny amount. A lot of these, especially when you're dealing with subtle poses, not making a pose that's supposed to be straight and turning into like a huge dynamic, like everything is at a severe angles. No, it's not that. But it's trying to find these little changes that we can throw in there and make a pose more interesting. So we've got line of action. We've got our twist and contrapposto. What was the other one? Straights versus curves. Well, straights versus curves is essentially, let's kind of move this over here. Let's go with our contrapposto again. If we push this, you can see that this side is squashed. So that would be a bend here in the body. And this one would be stretched. Bend versus straight, or bend versus curves. There's a lot of different names for it. It's straight versus curve, bend versus curve, bend versus straight. It's all the same concept. It's contrast. One side is taut while the other one is bent. So we can do that. Suddenly, if we mix all of these together along with silhouette. So for example, silhouette, that's how clear is our visual image. This silhouette's actually pretty good. So I wouldn't have a problem with this one pretty much the way it is. I might just try to push the negative space right in here. It kind of feels a little small visually, but that depends on how far my camera is away. Now actually one thing, yeah. So it's one thing I would watch out for if my character had a bandolier. See how this line here is tangenting with this? They're both parallel with each other. That's something I would change. So you look for little elements like that as well, but that's more fine detail nitpicky stuff. For now, we're just going to watch the big picture stuff. Contrapposto, line of action, twist. And from here, we can start to push things. So with just these concepts here, we can go from here, and let's just do a quick little drawing over top. So I'm going to try and exaggerate the pose. We'll bring the shoulder up a little bit more, kind of push that twist of the body here, right through here. The hips come down on this side, so we get that kind of bend through here, and I'm going to really push that straight in this leg through there. So we're getting this twist in the body here. And you can do drawovers like right on top of the pose like I'm doing here. You could just do a gesture drawing on your own. Without doing a drawover, it could be a little thumbnail or even a keyhole drawing, which I'll show in just a second. Let's see, can I get a playlist? I don't have a full playlist, but if you actually look right there and go to ocremix.org, which let's see, does it say OC Remix? Not there. So just do a Google search for OC Remix. I can type. So it's Overclocked Remix. Go to ocremix.org. You can find all the songs that I'm playing here, and you can just search for the names. It's all free play songs and all basically remixes of video game music, which I really love. So definitely check that out and support the artist. There's a lot of really good artists on there. Okay. So let's kind of keep this going here. So we'll push that shoulder. Maybe if we want this character to like raise the shoulder, we can maybe push that shoulder up a little bit more, make him a little bit kind of stronger looking right there. The other shoulder we can drop down a little bit. So I'm just trying to exaggerate this posing ever so slightly. Now, I mentioned that the arms feel a little twinned. See how they're just kind of flat? Well, let's just push that. We made a note of it. Now let's push it. So this pose let's bring this shield arm out a little bit more. And this is going to help push that negative space in here. Make that a little bit more clear. The shield, I'm going to try to keep it as close as possible. So the shield is going to be right here. Now we go into the other arm. Let's maybe push this angle a little bit more. Right now it's kind of flat and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of strength in there. If we push this is what the whole point of exploration is. We try things. So don't just go, okay, I changed the angle of the shoulders and the hips and I'm good. Try to push things a little bit more where you can. So maybe this arm is just a little higher here. And you can see I'm trying to keep this drawing very simple overall. And then we've got the spear in there. Right there. And now we get the head. Okay. So you can do it like this. And essentially what I'm trying to do is trying to push the straights versus curves on one side, or on the sides here, and just exaggerating. Okay. So how does this pose feel? Well, it's definitely much more dynamic than our first drawing right there, our first analysis drawing. And no worries about interrupting. That's what these streams are all for, is answering your questions. So all of you always feel free to ask questions. So we get something like this. Now, is that better? Yeah, definitely. We're getting a little bit more of a line of action. We're really trying to exaggerate the shoulders and the legs there. Is it as good as it could be? It could probably be better, but it's something. We are starting to analyze before we even go into Maya. Now, if you aren't great at drawing, you could go into Maya and do exploration in there. Just be aware it's going to be much slower. Or you can use keyhole drawings. These are what I used when I first started, which is just imagine a keyhole. So you just draw a square with a circle on top, like this, and then add legs and arms. So it's like a keyhole for an old door. The nice thing with these is you can use them for posing. So for example, let's recreate this pose. You've got the head right here. You can use the direction right there. And actually his head's kind of angled this way. So I just always do a cross for the face. I find it's easiest without having to draw facial details. The most I'll usually draw when I'm planning animation is like the ear, because it helps to show the direction of the head. So we've got that. And now for the body, let's keep that same thing. We want that contrapposto in there, right there, and then the straights versus curve. So we'll get the angle of the shoulders in, take our little keyhole, get that nice angle to the body here, and then from there, push the leg. The other leg comes in here. Stick arms. You don't even really need a neck. There we go. That's it. This is, when I started animating, this is how I drew. I just did these little doodles, keyhole drawings, and they give you all the information you need. At least most of the information, I should say. It gives you your contrapposto, it gives you your line of action, and it's easy and quick to do. Like you saw, it took me maybe 30 seconds to do this whole drawing right there. If you were to try and pose this out and try to explore your drawings, try to make multiple variations in Maya, it takes a whole lot longer. So I highly recommend doing this. And you can do it on paper. I'm doing it on a computer. Either is fine. So we keep exploring. Now, actually, one other note on keyhole drawings is once you get kind of used to it, I would make a few additions. So the first step is just this very basic keyhole. Once you get a little bit more used to it, try to expand it. So you have still the simple keyhole here, but add spheres for the shoulders here. The reason this is helpful is, let's say you want your character to shrug. How do you get the shrug to work? Well, you just take the spheres and move them up. So now you get that shrug control in there versus if they were lower down here. It just gives you an extra little thing to look at. And then additionally, once you get more comfortable, just use crosses for the hips and the chest, and that'll help you add that three-dimensionality and the twist in there. So it's the same concept, like this and this, same basic premise, just a little bit more anatomical detail. That's really the only difference. You don't have to be able to draw to be able to animate. This is honestly the extent of my drawing skills. Like, I don't go much further than this ever. So we've got that. We've got that exploration there. What else can we do? Well, at this point, we've kind of analyzed the pose. We're starting to push things. Let's try to push things further and maybe try to change things up. So in our shot, we've got this kind of straight line from basically the armpit all the way down to the leg. Well, what if we try to push a little bit more of a curve in here? So I'm just going to do some quick drawings where maybe I'm going to push the straight on this side. So we go straight here, and then we'll push the bend on the other side. Like so. Now the shoulders still come up on this side here. Let's keep that in place. And you can see I'm just doing it very quick. I'm not trying to worry too much about a ton of detail here. And then the other shoulder comes back here. Okay. So we get something like this. I've just created a different variation of the pose, just thinking of my line of action. Instead of straight right through there, I'm going slightly curved, and I'm pushing my straights versus curves onto the other side. So now one side is much simpler than the other. I've reversed it. And I can now see, how does this feel? Which do I feel is a little stronger? I can compare. Which one do I like? They give a different vibe, but if my character is supposed to be holding a spear and like about to throw it, think of the motion and what does the shape of the pose tell us of the character? This is where knowing psychology a little bit and like how a character moves and how lines and shapes tell a story is very important. So for example, a very simple thing, if I take 3 shapes here, a circle, a square, and a triangle, what does each shape make you feel? For most people, a circle is soft, it's safe, it's family, it's complete. It feels peaceful. For most people, a square is solid. It is dependable. It's unchanging. It's this constant that you have. It's also heroic. A triangle is sharp. It's pointy. It could be dangerous. There's these different ideas that we have based on different shapes. And this goes into that posing checklist that I mentioned. This goes into, where did I have it here? Not visual anchors. Simplified shapes right here. So you think of these simplified forms and what do they mean? Also, how does the psychology of a pose work? So let's kind of take these here. What differs between these two poses? Well, visually they're pretty similar. It's a straight line versus a curve, straight line versus a curve. They're also both leaning in the same direction. So similarly, oh, what's the difference? Well, if we kind of break it down, the big difference is which side is more stable. In this case, the side that is away from where he's looking is more stable. The side that is facing it is kind of hunched over. What this gives is a feeling of the character kind of flinching away. It's almost like, don't hurt. Like it's coming down. It's trying to back away. It feels like he's trying to pull away this way. It also makes it feel like if he was hit, he wouldn't be braced for it. He would just get hit and collapse. This one, because we've got that straight on this side, it's like a shield. It's a wall. He's got his shield up and it's just nothing gets past here. Not only that, the side that's ready to attack is the one that's got the angles here. So it's making it so he feels solid on this side, and this side feels like it's ready to move and get thrown versus being solid and straight. If he's got the spear on the solid side, that makes it feel like he's a guard, just standing there, not moving. So when you start breaking down the psychology, all of a sudden when we have these two poses and we're going, which one's better? We can start making informed choices versus just, I'll pose a character, boop, in the shot. I hope it's good. That's not what we want. We want to try and push a pose to really tell a story. Now this is going like above and beyond what the original intent of this demo was. The original intent is just how to get a pose to go from boring and stiff to more visually interesting. And essentially it's just breaking it down, trying to understand, and then making variations. That's the key here. And probably the one that I see most often not utilized is oftentimes people will start doing this process where they start to explore and start to kind of exaggerate certain things, and they'll get one version and go, I'm done. I got it. It's exaggerated. Let's move on. Don't. Especially for your key storytelling poses, and when you're looking at your reference, explore these. Try to figure out, okay, how can I make this stronger? So for example here, what if I push the line of action so that he's leaning forward? It's still going to be the same pose, but instead I'm going to draw this. Let's actually put it right beside, keep everything in line here. Whoop. So I'm going to push the chest so it's leaning forward, and then this leg is kind of leaning back here. And once again, don't take a lot of time on this. Use that keyhole drawing to your advantage. Just think of the simple forms. So we get something like this. Bring the head in. Let's get an angle there. Okay. His legs are getting shorter and shorter on each iteration. That's fine. We're not worried about anatomical like exactitudes. This is just trying to get the feeling in there. Okay. So, how does this feel in comparison? Well, it's definitely different. Is it bad? No. It makes him feel like he's more active, like he's about to throw the spear. Instead of just kind of being at the ready, we're starting to get that wind up in the character. Now, is that what we want in the shot? Maybe. Maybe we know that the character is going to be throwing, or that they're going to be more antagonistic, so we want them to be a little bit pushed this way. Even though it's not in our reference, it can make the shot stronger. And this is where a lot of beginning animators, they will take their reference and just copy it. and like follow it very closely. And that's not a bad thing because you're learning the body mechanics. But what it weakens is the idea behind the shot. The idea can be so much more than what we shot in our reference. It can be so much more in depth and thought out and really kind of fleshed out to really fit that key story you want to tell your audience. And if we take this time and explore these small changes or sometimes big changes that we can do to a pose, we can make a story more dynamic. So how does that feel? Honestly, I still kind of like this one more for the type of pose we had. Again, this is really based on what kind of story we're doing. If he was about to throw, this is pretty nice, and it makes him more antagonistic because he's leaning forward, but it also weakens him because if someone came up on this side, they could just go knock him over and he's gonna fall over. Now, maybe that's just a matter of straightening out this leg, keeping him more in balance here. So I can change that up. Don't just go with your first version. So like that. Now he feels more stable. Okay, do I like that? Straight versus curve. It's the same as this, straight versus curve, same side, but we're just exaggerating the twist and where he's shifting his weight. Now he's shifting his weight closer to this leg versus this leg. Okay, let's explore some more. I do like that first version, but what if we just really exaggerate that straight versus curve? So we're going to get the chest in here and let's really just push that angle forward there. Angle in the chest, contrapposto in the hips, but with the other hip, we're going to bend his leg. And this is like, I'm not using any like formula for this. It's not like, oh, you have to bend the leg, you have to do this. This is just me coming up with ideas and going, okay, how would the pose look if I did so and so? So we're trying to push this here, and maybe the head's gonna go up here. You'll notice I kind of jump back and forth between things. That's totally fine. So now this leg comes forward. So he's a little bit more dynamic here. Right through there. That shoulder, let's kind of bring it up a little bit higher. Just see how that feels. And then the other arm, let's kind of bring that spear just up a little higher as well. And let's kind of keep it consistent here. Oh, missed the arm. There you go. So, something like that. It's the same basic premise. You've got your straight versus your curve. You've got your line of action going through. Same basic idea, but we are exaggerating the idea behind it. Now, does this work? It definitely makes him feel more like he's ready for action. It makes it feel like he's about to attack or like he's ready to defend, versus this one where if I was to just put the spear straight down, it would feel like he's just standing there. Is that good or bad? It depends on the shot. A lot of times when we're shooting reference, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make these action-packed, cartoony shots where our characters are moving and doing this really cool stuff. But in reality, when we're shooting reference, you might have just like, this is my reference room right here where I usually shoot reference. It's not that wide. I can't even stretch out my arms all the way without hitting this side, and then you can see I'm actually hitting my Cintiq over here. So I can go like this far without starting to knock into things. That's where I usually shoot my reference for most shots, unless I'm doing a very big shot, which I'll go outside for. For most shots, I do it here. That's not very much room. Which means that if I'm trying to do this big dynamic shot, I'm limited, and I might do it more stiffly than I really want. But the end goal is that I do want something like this. So ideally, the ideal is that you would have a place to move around and get as close as you can. But if you're not, if you're stuck in a small apartment, or you don't have room to go outside to record reference, we need to push our poses to get the true idea we want and not what we're limited to in our space. So push your poses, and you can see all of this started from this. Like, let's actually draw this out. The pose that could have happened if we just went straight into Maya and kind of pose this out. So we've got the body here. There's no straights versus curves, so this leg is coming out this way. This leg is coming out this way. Let's see. I don't want to make it super boring here. I still want to put as much effort into drawing this as I can, so we have a good comparison here. But we have something like this where this shoulder was definitely a little higher, so let's kind of push that up here. This shoulder comes down here. The other arm comes down the same angle. And then this arm was kind of up here. Spear. And then the head. But the chest is straight. The hips are straight. The legs are even. Let's kind of move things around here. Whee! This is the nice part about drawing digitally. Whoop. And then move this closer. So, oh, little keyhole guy, you're in the way. Move. Boop. So, this was the first version, kind of drawn very basically over the reference. Does that look as interesting? No. But that's what I usually see with student work when people are trying to copy their reference, is that they're trying to copy the posing of the reference, the general posing, versus pushing the concepts of the posing. What is the pose really trying to tell us, and how can we make it exaggerated? Even if the pose itself is boring in the reference, what is the idea behind it, and how can we take the tiny little elements and exaggerate them to be dynamic? So I hope this is making sense. And again, this is not to say that you have to have drawing skills. Not at all. Keyhole drawing. Little guy here. As long as you can do that, and just think of the concepts of drawing, so that the checklist that I sent, go through all of that, that's what's going to get you a good pose. You think through each one of those. And we can start to make a pose that's much more dynamic and specific to a detail in our story. That's the key. So I hope this makes sense so far. And if anyone's questioning that, let me know. Let's see. Would the way his shield move? Yeah, so you can change the way the shield is. It could go up, it could go down, it could be relaxed a little bit more. You can change that. Now, one key here that I do want to mention is if you push the pose too much. So let's say we push the pose and now we're pushing it so that his head is down here. Like, he's coming down. The shield has come up to like brace himself up here. We're still keeping the concepts here, but now we're really like pushing the pose, so maybe he's trying to block an arrow, like that. It's like covered in arrows, and he's got the spear like at the ready to throw here. So you've got the spear kind of there. this kind of stuff, you don't want to push it that far, because now you're not using the concept behind the pose where the character is standing. You're changing the idea. Now, technically you can't change this. This is not a bad thing in and of itself, but just be aware that if you do a big change like this, you're gonna want to shoot new reference, because at this point, the reference that you have and the body mechanics that you have are not gonna really apply to this. It's changed too much. So there is a limit here, but before your reference starts to become unusable. In which case, it's okay. Just reshoot a small section of your reference. Go into that new pose, feel that out. Exploration passes, it's not just about pushing what you already have, it's sometimes coming up with a new idea. So you come up with your idea, shoot your reference, okay, let's see if I can push my poses. You push it, push it, push it, and you go, you know, I really want this to happen in this moment. Okay, let's get back up, shoot some more reference with this new idea in mind. There you go. So it's a good way to brainstorm ideas as well. See, an issue I often have with poses, taking a cool pose and then trying to make it look cool on a goofy rig like Stuart. So for that, it's once again just understanding the posing elements and what makes a good pose. Regardless of the rig, we should be able to pose them out. So for example, you're going to get rigs that are very stubby. Think Vanellope from Wreck-It Ralph. You'll get rigs like Wreck-It Ralph, very big and blocky. You're going to get characters who are big, huge brutes, like giant triangle shaped characters where their body shape is basically like this, with just a tiny little head on top and huge, gigantic arms. You're going to get tiny characters. You're going to get characters with giant heads. Just think of like really cartoony characters with tiny little bodies. And regardless of the body type, we need to make them interesting and appealing. That all comes down to the posing checklist, making sure your line of action is good, your silhouettes are good, all of that stuff. Now, how do you translate it from one to the other? Let's say we have a pose here. We'll keep this pose while we're at it. And you need a character, or you have a character that's going to be a totally different proportion. Let's go with the big brute character here. Well, this is once again where gesture drawing and doing quick planning can help you out, at least for a start. So let me grab a sip of water here. And Sleep the Prod, hey! Oh, a whole year. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Man. And also, hello! So, we know the body type of our character is going to be big, broad-chested, big, huge arms, tiny little legs. So, what we'll do is, I'll just do a version of the pose and do an exploration with that. And once again, you can do this with your keyhole drawings. You'd change your little proportions here to have a tiny little head. And you'd kind of reverse it right here. So like that. It's still a keyhole drawing, just a very weird keyhole. So I'm going to take that chest, big, broad chest. Kind of push this in here. I want that chest to be rotated up here. And then his hips are going to be very small. I'm going to try to recreate this one. So we start to go in here, tiny little legs, like so. And already I can see that he's going to start falling out of balance. If I lean him so far here, he's going to start falling. Okay. Right here in my planning phase, I can go, he'll need a wider stance. This foot will have to be further out so that he can stay balanced the way he is, because his chest is so wide. And this, when I do this, I'll usually have like the rig open, so I can just look at it and see what the proportions are like. That way it's just a little easier to keep track and make sure I'm not totally far off. You don't have to be exactly on, as long as you're close enough. Hey, congrats on graduating. That's huge. Congrats. Yay, free time, hopefully. That's awesome. Oh man, huge congrats. So, now the character has these huge arms. So let's kind of push that up here. Big arm right through there. Well, how can I push this arm? If I'm not careful, his arm is just going to cross over the silhouette here and hide everything. The other arm back here is just going to hide everything. Okay, I can't do that. Now this is where we start thinking through. If his arms are so big, I'm going to have to pull them out a little bit more. Okay, so his pose is going to be a little bit more like this. Now the shield. Is the shield going to be the same size? Is it going to be like a tiny little shield on his arm? Or he's going to have a huge shield? We get to choose that. Or depending on the shot, we'll have that given to us, but we'll have to think about that. This arm, big arm, holding the spear. You'll notice I draw hands very simply. And let's kind of bring the spear in there. And then the head, well, I'm going to use a character that I know. The head is going to be lower down here. It's not going to be up over the shoulders. So it's the same idea, but we're trying to apply the proportions and trying to think at this stage, before we go any further, what are we going to have to do to make this work? To make this character feel believable with this pose here? How can we make it as dynamic as possible? So right here, one thing I'm noticing is that I'm really leaning him forward here. Let's do another version. So I just do a lot of these. I do so much exploration drawings in whenever I'm coming up with a new shot, and there's a section like, sometimes you don't need to do it. You don't always have to do this, but especially when there's a moment where it's like, my reference isn't the greatest, let's try to push it. I will do a whole bunch of these. Like this is nothing. It is a big part of every animation that I do, is thinking through this kind of phase. So I want to push the chest up a little higher here. And you'll notice that my drawings, again, very simple. Try to get that head just a little higher. There we go. Now we're getting that kind of chest puffed out feeling. But it's feeling a little twinned right now. See how everything's kind of centered and kind of boring? Well, that's the joy of this phase, is I can just kind of push that. There we go. More dynamic. Now that head is over top of the other leg there. And I'm pushing that line of action. So with this body type, I feel like I can't quite get that straight in here. So now I'm getting this straight on the other side. It's not as ideal, but with this body type, I can get a different pose and a different idea in there. So don't be afraid to change things up. The key here is that we'll never know until we actually try. So give it a try. Do a quick test. And you can see, like, this took how long to do both of these versions, and now we can kind of see, which one do I like? And same thing, keep just trying ideas. There's no bad ideas. But we went from this first one, and you can see how it's evolved, and we've got all of these different variations now. this is so helpful. Doing an exploration pass is going to be a lifesaver in a lot of cases. And it's really going to be what pushes your shots from just being a copy of your reference. That's what we don't want, a copy of our reference. If it's just a copy of our reference, why aren't we just shooting a live action film? If it's just rotoscoped, if it's just copied, we want to make it more than what the reference is. See, even if you can draw anatomically detailed drawings, I find speed always helps with gesture. Yes, that's a good point. Very good point. Even if you know how to draw a lot of details. So for example, if I know how to, the one thing I kind of know how to draw, which I haven't done in a long time, so as I say that, it's going to look horrible now, is like the leg. So when you're drawing the leg, there's a lot of musculature that you can kind of put into the leg here. You've got the hip, comes in here, goes through there. You've got your quadriceps that come in through here, into the knee, goes through. So I could go in and put a ton of detail into this kind of leg drawing here and really try to get anatomically correct angles, and there's kind of a little bit more muscle right there that connects down, and then we get connection right through here, right there, connects into the knee. So I could do this and I could get like super detailed in this foot, but is that going to help? No, because no one cares. Who cares about all this detail? Little stick leg here is going to get me all I need. Maybe just a little bit of mass here. But honestly, like keyhole, these little keyhole drawings, this was the whole start of my animation career, was these. And they served me well. So yeah, don't worry about anatomy, worry about speed, and not trying to rush it. Just like get them out there, get as many variations, think through as many variations. That's what's important. That we try things, we explore. Otherwise, we're stuck with the idea that we started with. So, if anyone has questions on that, definitely let me know. But let's see. Let's go with another pose here, just for the sake of demoing. Let's pick another one. Let's see, kind of boring pose. Let's pick this one. He's just standing there. He's not even holding a prop. So let me save this out here. Copy this in. And let's create a new layer as well. Okay. So same thing with this pose. I'm just going to do a very quick variation here. Because at this point, I'm sure you guys get it. It's not that super complex of a concept to go over this for like 3 hours. But once again, if we look at this pose, look at how straight everything is. His body is straight. The line of action is straight. Everything kind of just hangs off evenly. The arms are bent kind of evenly. If I was to analyze this and just kind of go, okay, here's my line of action, here's the angles that I want to get, it's not super interesting. It's okay, but there we go. Does that look good? Not really. It's very stiff, very straight. Everything's bland. So let's push it. Let's look for any little details. Well, it kind of looks like he's got his chest puffed up. Maybe we'll exaggerate that because this is some arrogant king who thinks he's better than everyone else, or some arrogant baron who's just walking into the party and it's like thinks he's just the what would be the term? The cream of the crop. That's the one I'm looking for. So we want to push that chest up. Okay. So we've got the contrapposto that we can think of. The shoulders are this way, so we can push the hips a little bit more this way. Straights versus curves. We can bend this here. And let's try to exaggerate that straight right through here. So we start exaggerating that. Twist. Well, let's think of the MVP. That's a good way to put it. So how does he want people to perceive him? Is he straightforward and he's like chest out, haha, look at me, the hero pose where it's like just like behold me, the greatest? Or is he, oh, you're not even worth my time? That changes his personality. That knowing who this character is changes how we can push the pose, or changing what the story is supposed to be changes the pose. So if he's supposed to be kind of this like nose in the air, better than the rest, and he like, don't even approach me, I'm too good for the likes of you kind of thing. Well, let's push that twist so that the chest will be rotated up and out here, whereas the hips are going to be kind of more forward. So essentially what we're doing is, let's draw it in a cube form here. The chest is kind of out this way, up, whereas the hips might face a little bit more towards the audience. So we get something like this. You get that twist in the body, the upper chest there. Okay, let's keep pushing this. Let's kind of simplify this here. I'm getting a little too complex anatomically. That's something I have to remind myself a lot, is sometimes I'll start like putting musculature where I really don't need. And then let's kind of push this leg out here. And then the shoulder, if we want him to feel like he doesn't want to interact, that shoulder is going to be higher. Even though it's kind of angled down, it's going to be up and kind of blocking his subjects a little bit, or whoever it is that's looking at him. So it's going to be a little bit more forward. Now the arms, look at how they're just kind of even on both sides. What if we just put one higher than the other? So maybe this arm we kind of let hang just a little bit more down here, whereas the other arm we raise up. And we don't even have raised it up that much because we lowered the other one so much. But we get something like this. Okay. How does that feel? Well, visually, I could draw that a lot better, but it's a little bit more interesting. Now let's actually just take that now and try to push it more so to get a little bit more visual appeal instead of just tracing. And honestly, tracing is fine as long as you're getting the ideas out. So I want that nice straight on this side. Let's try to push that visual appeal here. And I think I can push us straight in this leg a little bit more. So a little bit more like this. Let's push that twist in there a little bit more. Maybe this arm, I kind of like it just leaning down here. So let's kind of take that whole arm and just let it droop. So we could do something like that. So I did one version, and now I can iterate. Okay, let's do another version. we'll keep the same basic concept, but let's try to exaggerate something here. So let's try to exaggerate the line of action. Maybe push that leg further back so that the other leg comes out here. The shoulder here, let's kind of bring this arm in. I kind of like that already. That arm in, it just feels better. And then this arm down. Yeah, I'm already liking this a little bit more. I'm not sure about the legs, but the arms definitely have more of a arrogance to them by putting it this way. This way it almost feels like he's leaning over, and it feels tired. It's almost like he's looking at something, what's that? And he's just tilted over. And, Whereas with the arm up, it's kind of just sashaying a little bit more. So we keep going. Well, I like the arms, but let's try the legs again. And I could just erase this here. So, okay, I like the upper body, but what if legs go other way? So out and then in. And you could always just copy the image if you're doing in digital, or trace over the original and just change the legs. So something like that. You actually see this a lot in storyboarding, even in 2D story or hand-drawn storyboarding. What you do in that case, because you don't want to be erasing a whole bunch of stuff, or maybe you have a revision that you want to do, you take a post-it note. So let's say we have this drawing here, and man, I like this version, but I want to see how it would look with different legs. I'm gonna just replicate it here, but in traditional media, what you would do is essentially take a post-it note, and let's have a flat color here. Where's my flat? Brush. Weird. Here. Well, we'll use this. So you'll take a post-it note, put it over top of the section that you want to redraw, or you could just get a clipping of a piece of paper. So imagine this is a post-it note. We'll use our imagination for it. And then you just go back to your pencil and draw over top. So I want this leg to be straight here and this to come in. You see this a lot. If you actually look at storyboard artists and look at their boards, there's post-it notes everywhere because they will redraw facial expressions, different parts of the body, different poses, just like that. And what that allows them to do is go, and just turn that on and off. You can do this, the same thing here. It's comparing and exploring. Nothing is set in stone yet. So figure out which one you want to go with. So we started off with that boring thing, and we're starting to get something a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting. So yeah, that's basically the demo I wanted to go over today. The big thing here is do an exploration pass. If you are just going straight from your reference right into your oh, and there you go, A to the J, always with the links. So that's the demo I did on the posing checklist for anyone who wants to have a little bit more of an in-depth explanation of what all of these are. So sympathetic motion, tangents, exaggeration, all of this stuff. That's the demo where I talk in depth about all of those elements.